Hi, we're back with the CT70, this time doing engine work. So the last time we saw this bike, it was when I was fixing the electrical components. I basically replaced the entire wiring harness from Trail Buddy and got all the lights to work, everything auxiliary that wasn't working previously. And I wanted to take this on its maiden voyage because I've had this bike for weeks now and it hasn't really made it beyond my garage. And unfortunately, when I did that, it didn't make it much further than that, maybe about 50, 100 feet, before I realized there was a pretty major issue occurring somewhere in the engine, specifically, I think the clutch. I was getting up to speed in first gear and then shifting into second, and then immediately after shifting into second, I would start to go forward and then it would surge, it would rev up almost like I pulled in the clutch. So the clutch was slipping really, really badly. So what I'm doing tonight is taking apart the clutch and inspecting it, seeing what's wrong. My guess is that there's probably something loose and that needs to be tightened or needs to be replaced, but we'll find that out. So you joined me at the clutch side of the engine, and I've taken the time to do the grunt work ahead of time. So I drained the oil and I took off the clutch cover, as you can see here, and did a cursory glance at everything. Now I haven't worked on Lifan 140cc engines before, but thankfully these are clone engines and very reminiscent, obviously, of the OG Grom, which I'm very, very familiar with. We have our clutch basket here with our plates and our springs behind them, and we have an oil spinner here, albeit a lot smaller than you would see on the Grom. At first glance, I don't see any issues moving things around slowly, seeing that everything moves and that there's no binding in any of the gears or anything. It looks fine, but then when you get to the clutch basket, that's where we see it is very, very loose, and I suspect that is the culprit here. That is the reason why this thing is slipping so badly. What I suspect is that behind this, where the nut is to keep this clutch basket in place on the shaft, is probably loose, finger tight, maybe even backed out to the backing plate and the bearing right here. So to confirm that, I'm going to start taking things apart, taking off these 4 plates here. We should be able to clean off the surface behind it, and then in the middle right here there should be a nut to remove the entire thing. Then I would have full access to the clutch basket here. I can be able to take off all 4 of these backing plates and the clutch basket itself, and I can see if it's actually tight there. So let's go ahead and do that. Finally got the oil spinner off. This gasket was just fused to it absolutely, and I got to cleaning it, and this is what came out of it. It was pretty nasty. I don't think anyone has ever cleaned this thing out ever in the lifetime of this engine. Well, this nut is tight, but everything else behind it just seems so wobbly. There's no way it has this much play, right? Well, we're gonna have to take that off and keep going. Dig a little deeper.
Tomorrow.
Well, it's tomorrow and I've figured out a lot. I did a huge deep dive and we have a lot of new parts. So the first major thing that I noticed was even though the nut on here was very tight and torqued correctly, it was still giving me a lot of play back and forth on this shaft. And the reason why is because it's actually attached in the back where this notch is. So it uses a notched washer that you see here, and it attaches on the shaft, but you shift it, and then there's another locking washer with tangs that go in there to lock it in place. And if you can see here, there's still a lot of play that happens behind it, and this is where the basket actually holds on. So knowing where this was, I was convinced that I was missing an additional washer, something that had to go behind here, either behind this washer or behind the gear itself on the bearing. But I verified this and checked many times. There is no such washer behind this one. This is the one furthest back. Now it's actually okay to have that much play on the shaft, but only going in one direction. And since I got a new clutch, out of curiosity, I wanted to see side by side, old versus new, as you can see here, what the difference in that play was. And while they both had some in and out play, the old one definitely had some side to side wobble. So I think what was happening was the old clutch basket was so worn on the inside that the gear right here that it connects to was just wearing it out and was giving it enough play that it would tilt side to side. Looks like the new clutch should be perfect. Not only that, but this new clutch basket came with the entire assembly with brand new washers, brand new nuts, brand new bearing, everything. And so as you can see here, this is the old one and this is the new one. And the new one I actually had to modify a little bit. You can see I took a Dremel to the sides because this washer is actually much wider than the old one. Hopefully you can see that right there. There is a significant difference there. So this will actually help it as well with that in and out play. This one being a little bit thicker, it will push up more against that gear, so it should have less slop as it's moving left and right. And now that it's all installed, you can see that is the case. There is no more side to side wobble, up and down wobble. All we have is just some left and right play, just a little bit, on the shaft as we expect. Nothing left to do but button everything back up and cross my fingers that that's what solves our problem. Only issue with that is the clutch cover has a ripped gasket, so I gotta wait for that, but it should be in here tomorrow for sure. Hold on past me. See this picture? See anything wrong with that? It's okay, because I didn't see it at first, but right there, that's a problem. This arm was actually not fitting into the groove of this kind of star-shaped gear selector right here, and rather it was up against this nut itself. So that would definitely have to do with my shifting problem because this was not grooved correctly. It wasn't holding the gear. That would be even more cause for slip. Definitely more so than just that wobble in the clutch. Not to say that that wasn't an issue to begin with, that certainly was, and I'm glad that I'm fixing that, but I'm also glad that I took a look at this a second, third, fourth time really, and saw that this was not exactly where it should have been. So to make sure that that was the case, I pulled off this idling gear right here, and then behind it is a bolt where this arm is connected to with a spring behind it, and just made sure that that was nice and tight. I saw that this bar itself was actually kind of bent outward a little bit, so I put it in the vice grip just for a little bit to kind of bend it back into shape, make sure that it's straight and it has pressure on the inside of this star shape rather than on the outside, so it won't slip out and then just spring up and hit this bolt. Just goes to show the importance of checking your work. I know carpenters will always say measure twice, cut once. This is kind of like the motorcycle equivalent of that. While you have things open, take a screwdriver, take a socket to every single nut and bolt that you can, just making sure that things are tight, and at the same time, making sure that everything is in the place that it's supposed to. Now that we have everything fully wrapped up and I've literally touched over every single component on this clutch cover, let's button it all up for real and see that it works. Fingers crossed. So far, so good. Oh, Jesus. Really? Oh, Jesus Christ. See that? My hand's not on the clutch. Oh, ho, ho, ho. Oh, my heart. Won't even go into neutral. Not a clutch issue. Turns out it was a gearbox issue. Maybe I was just hoping that it was a clutch issue so I can solve this problem or think that I solved this problem and move on, but nope, it was much worse than that. Gearbox is toast. Finito, concluded, no more. So I bought an engine.